This creepypasta is called Choke.exe. Well, I'm not sure where to start. The past few weeks have been pretty rough for me. I lost my mom last spring to cancer. It caused a great deal of grief among my family. However, my father took it the worst. He was never the same after mom's death. He locked himself in his house all alone, spacing himself from the rest of the world, spacing himself from me. It was odd. Throughout his entire life, he always been so outgoing. My mother, my sister, and I were all that he had. Now that my older sister had grown up, married, and moved a few towns over, I guess I was all he had now. 2 weeks ago, I received a call. I was on 4chan, an infamous board site, reading comments on one of those you laugh you lose threads. Ugh, whatever happened to ritual content? Alright, straying away from the current topic. Having been in front of my monitor for hours in dead silence, I've been caught off guard when my ringtone, Joey Scarberry's Believe It or Not, blared from my phone's tiny yet powerful speakers. I nearly jumped out of my seat. I grabbed my phone and checked the caller ID. It was a local hospital, calling to tell me that my father had killed himself. A week later, my sister came down for the funeral. It was nice to see her again after all these years. Even if it was under harsh circumstances, she didn't bring that douchebag of a husband with her either. We shared a few hugs, talked about the deceased for a while, and then she was on her way. His house and all of his contents were given to me. Needless to say, it was a nice step up from my one-bedroom apartment. I decided to go snooping around in my new place the following day, maybe clean it up a bit. Honestly, I had no clue what I'd find in there. For all I knew, he lost all sense of modesty following the death of my mother. I half expected to see shit smeared all over the walls, along with wrecked furniture. I was at the front door, and upon grabbing the doorknob, a feeling of dread overcame my body instantly. I froze up. The idea of being in the same room that my father had hung himself, it didn't sit well with me. I shook my head and swallowed my disturbed feelings. I took a deep breath, preparing myself, then closed my eyes and opened the door. The front door led me into a hallway that split into two directions. In front of me was a door leading to the bathroom. To the right was the living room. Expecting the worst, I turned the corner. To my surprise, everything was in pristine condition. I scanned the area, and there were a few couches surrounding an ancient-looking television set. My father had never been all that tech-savvy. What caught my eye, though, was the large fireplace near the seating. I didn't remember this. Granted, I'd only been in the house a handful of times, but from my recollection, it hadn't been there before. Now, the fireplace isn't exactly what caught my attention. It was what was mounted above it. It was a large, framed, painted portrait of my mother, surrounded with the candles on the fireplace mantle. Something just seemed a bit off. She had a condescending smirk on her face, as if to say, "I know something that you don't." Again came that eerie feeling. I really felt as if I wasn't supposed to be in this house. Being the dumbass I am, I decided to stick around for a while longer. Venturing into the kitchen, I snooped around. Cupboards were filled with new-looking dish sets, and the fridge was filled with nothing but beer and water. Good old Dad. A thought crossed my mind. I should check out the master bedroom, the room where he hung himself. I pushed back any unsure feelings I had, and started heading towards the back of the house. The door to my father's room was slightly open, knots in my stomach growing ever so tight. I slowly pushed it ajar. The hinges let forth an obnoxiously loud creak. I had no idea why I was being so quiet. I tried hard to convince myself that I was the only person inside the house. The butterflies in my stomach refused to go away. The master bedroom was normal. Everything looked clear. I took a few steps while scanning the area. There was a nightstand to the right of his bed, his glasses resting atop, seemingly untouched. He never liked wearing them, said to make him look like a sissy boy. To the left of the room was a door. Something, I don't know what, drew me to it. I wanted to open it. No, I needed to open it. Making my way over to this mysterious door, I made sure to be quiet. Again, don't ask me why. I just felt like I'd be disturbing something if I made noise. I bit my lower lip, placing my hand on the knob. I was trembling in anticipation. I closed my eyes, counted down from 3, and quickly opened the closet. Coats. Lots of coats. Some pants and shoes too. If that's what you're into, it was a ordinary walk-in closet. I took a sigh, relieved, but secretly disappointed, until I saw it. Something shiny on the floor. Kneeling down, I moved a few shoe boxes out of the way. It was a brass handle, bolted to the ground. I also noticed a crease in the carpeted floor. It was a small hatch, leading into the basement. My heart raced. What could be down there? My lust for adventure got the better of me. Without thinking, I grabbed the brass handle and flung the hatch open. I peered inside, and it was dark. All of my instincts went against what I was about to do, but I completely ignored them. I jumped down. Luckily, it wasn't that high of a drop. I'd be able to pull myself out if need be. The basement was dark and extremely dusty. Fishing into my pocket, I pulled out my Zippo lighter. It took me a few tries, but I finally managed to get a steady flame to light up a small portion of the room. That's when I saw the last thing I never expected to see in my father's basement. A computer. Sitting at the edge of the room was a small desk. Keyboard, mouse, and monitor. One of those white plastic chairs was pushed into the desk. Curiously, I walked over to the station. The computer looked new, as if it had never been used. This couldn't be my father's. Why would he have a nice rig like this sitting in the basement? I pulled the flimsy chair from the desk and took a seat in front of the monitor. I crossed my fingers, leaned over, and tried booting up the computer. Eureka. It worked. The Windows 7 boot logo appeared on the screen. Again, it struck me as odd that my father owned such a nice, expensive-looking computer. It required me to select a user, and there was only one. Disappointment. A chill went down my spine. Disappointment? Why would he name his profile that? I clicked it and it asked me for a password. I grinned and typed in Cheyenne, my mother's name, and I'll be damned, it worked. I cocked my head to the side. Something was wrong. His desktop background was solid black. There was no start bar, and there was only one icon. In the middle of the screen was a single executable file. Choke.exe. My hands trembled. I had no idea what was going on here, or why I come here in the first place. I wanted to turn around and get back to the comfort of my apartment, but curiosity wouldn't let me. I couldn't control myself. Almost against my will, I hovered the cursor over the icon and double-clicked. The screen flickered. I figured there was something wrong with the cord. I reached my hand behind the machine, feeling for wires. Impossible. Nothing was plugged in. The computer emitted a high-pitched buzz, almost as if it were working itself too hard. Shades of blue, red, and green flashed on and off across the monitor. The computer's whining became louder and louder, sputtering with life, increasing with the intensity with every second. All of a sudden, everything became quiet again. I looked at the screen. There was a red dot in the very middle of the text underneath, simply stating, disappointment. My heart was pounding in my chest. Everything had come to a standstill. I relaxed for what seemed like a few seconds until I heard it. The sound of heavy breathing, and footsteps behind me, coming closer. I didn't dare shift my gaze from the computer monitor. The footsteps stopped, however, or whatever was behind me had leaned over. Their mouth was right next to my ear. I heard a familiar voice whisper, "Choke." With a great force, a rope was wrapped around my neck. I screamed as loud as I could. The rope tightened and I was yanked backwards out of my chair. I couldn't breathe. My neck was sore. My vision slowly started to fade away due to the lack of oxygen. I was going to die. I gagged and clawed at my neck. There was nothing there. I was on my hands and knees gasping for air. My vision had returned. I stood up and staggered around, trying to regain my bearings. I was in the living room, right in front of the fireplace. Looking down on me was that condescending smirk, was the portrait of my mother. Present day. As I sit here writing this in my dingy one-bedroom apartment, I can honestly say that there is no place like home. I have no idea what the hell happened, and honestly, I don't want to know. All I'm sure of it is that I'm never setting foot in that house again. This creepypasta is called 29th Dragon. Atop the salt-encrusted docks and piers of Seattle squats an ugly clapboard shack, its windows mirrored with grime and the walls draped in fishing nets. The oil slick, an amply named bar riddled with age and barnacles, but a sanctuary to the swarm of deckhands and sailors that spent their days scurrying across the rotting hulls of ships, and their nights slipping into a drunken stupor. It's a rough bar where a careless comment will earn you a punch to the face and a long fall into the grimy waters below. On any given night, one can find an aged Chinese sailor curled up against the bar, a broad-shouldered old salt with a bulging gut and an empty stare pasted across his wide face. His name is Hao Ming, but to the regular flotsam of the pub, he's known as the Man of the 28 Dragons. 28 scaly, tattooed reptiles twine sinously across his arms and legs and twist menacingly across the bunch muscles on his back. Hao claims each dragon represents a crucial part of his life. Stories transformed into ink. Buy him a drink and he'll be happy to share the thrilling tales behind each one, carefully describing how the dragon's colors represent his joy, terror, love, loss, and death. Visit him 28 nights and buy him 28 drinks, and the powerful stories of his life will weave and merge before your eyes until they resolve into the aging man drinking next to you. And then, satisfied, you have exhausted his treasury of adventures. You'll excuse yourself and float out into the night, the light and noise of the oil slick bobbing away across the dark waves, and the Man of the 28 Dragons will finish his drink and clutch his faded shirt to his chest, his last secret, his hidden dragon safe. He swore long ago to never reveal the tattoo or the story to any living soul, and he never has, except once. Once on a stormy night, when the rain spattered like ink across the grimy windows, and the wind howled through cracked wood, when he told a story to me. It began as an entertaining night as I leaned on the counter, sipping my poison and watching Ming pummel the face of some quartermaster who had drunkenly slurred a remark pertaining to damn slant eyes from across the bar. Stumbling backwards, the sailor grabbed at Ming's shirt, tearing the front and momentarily revealing Ming's chest. With a roar, Ming caught him under the chin and the drunkard slumped to the floor. Game over. Ming pulled the shirt back across his shoulders and walked back to his drink. The noise in the bar returned to normal, everyone laughing and continuing their private banter. I was the only one who noticed it. The black serpent scrawled over his heart, a Chinese dragon, its broad tail curling in loops behind it, long whiskers sprouting from his face like tangles of wet hair. Arming myself with the twin barrels of gil and alcohol, I took the seat next to him and offered him several slugs of amber liquid. He recognized me as one of the regulars and knowingly accepted my offer. Okay, friend, he winked, holding out his arms. What story do you want to hear tonight? I pointed my finger at his chest, indicating the hidden serpent curled around his heart. His smile vanished in a flash. With an inscrutable gaze, he stared into my eyes. His heavy lips curled down to a frown, almost a grimace. No good story, he grunted. Forget you've seen it, okay? I was tempted to give up, but noticed he was rocking slightly in his chair. Seizing my chance, I clapped him on the shoulder, telling him not to worry about it and ordering him several more drinks in the spirit of goodwill. 2 hours and a dozen drinks later, he broke. He began to sob quietly into his cup, telling me he was sorry, that he wanted to tell me but swore he wouldn't. With the precision of a surgeon, I knifed across his slurred words and stabbed into his psyche, prodding and poking until he dissolved completely. Closing his eyes, he began the story of the Black Dragon. I'll share it with you here. The oil clipper threaded its way across the currents of South China Sea, with a hole filled with rice. She was bound on a 3-week trip to Sydney. Ming, the lines of age not yet etched so deeply into his face, was a simple deckhand on the rusted, peeling bucket. The days rolled into nights as Ming performed his duties, his mind locked on their destination. The poor condition of the ship meant it needed a long overhaul in dry dock when it reached port, granting the crew a long shore leave. The men joked every night around the dim, steel cabin about the things they would drink, the places they would go, and the women that they will meet. But on the 10th day of the voyage, fate rose a middle finger against the ship and Ming's life. As the morning wore on, a steady breeze from the north quickly built into a typhoon. Waves pounded against and over the ship as a stinging wind tore across the bow. For the next 30 hours, Ming and the crew struggled against the howling chaos, shifting ballast and pumping the holds. Each man put every ounce of strength into saving the clipper, and ultimately his own life. 2 of the crew were torn from the deck and swallowed by the storm. At long last, there was nothing left to do but sit in a dark cabin and beg Poseidon for mercy. The crew awoke to a cloudless sunrise, the sea once again tranquil and flat. Walking outside, they surveyed the damage. The rudder had been torn free and the engine blocks destroyed. The ship was adrift. The cargo hold had been flooded and the cargo was lost. Even worse, the crashing waves had reached over the boat and sheared off the communication tower. Without radio navigation, low on food and fresh water, the crippled ship drifted helplessly across the blue expanse. Ming lay prostrate on the metal deck, feeling the sun beat savagely against his body. 3 nights ago, the food supplies had run out and the water was put on ration. A deckhand had died of an infected wound. Another injured man had escaped slow, lingering death by hanging himself. Morale was nigh. Even the captain had begun to eye the end of his own pistol. The next night, a light appeared on the horizon. "Rescue!" cried one of the men to another. They quickly built and lit a signal fire on the deck and waved flashlights into the dark, yelling and screaming out to the saviors. Their efforts were successful. The bright light was moving closer. At this point in the story, Ming dropped his voice into a low whisper. The crew's elation only rose as the ship drew near. Soon, a second light could be discerned under the first. The glow from the ship lit up the dark outlines of the men on the deck. They laughed and shouted, "Hello," across the water, but not Ming. Backing away from the light, Ming stumbled down the deck until he reached the cabin. Peering out of the metal porthole, he watched the men slowly realize what he had noticed first. There weren't 2 lights. There was one light, reflecting off the undisturbed surface of the water. Above, floating high over the waves, the ship glided into view. A dull, silver dome, hundreds of meters across, eclipsed the stars as it bore down upon the boat, its undersides blazing with inferno of the sun. A fire of light climbed up the sides of the hull and spilled across the deck, enveloping the crew. Heart hammering, Ming collapsed below the porthole. Outside, he hears the surprised cries of the men rising above the crackling of luminous air. A pistol shot rang out, and another. Ming flees across the cabin, spotting a metal locker. He ducks inside, pulling the door shut. More shots. Then the cries of men morph into screams and shrieks. Crouched over, Ming peers through a gap along the floor of the locker. Suddenly, the screams stop mid-breath. A spear of light smashes into the boat, the steel hull groaning and twisting. The inferno spreads across the length of the boat, penetrating into the cabin. The light pounces from the gap into Ming's eyes. With a yelp, he falls back. The blaze vanishes. Silence shrouds the ship. Ears ringing and eyes burning, Ming's head reels. He crouches down to peer through the crack again. Nothing. Minutes pass. With short breaths, he slowly reaches up to the latch. But as vision swims back into his clouded eyes and the ringing in his head subsides, he freezes. A soft noise brushes against the cloud of silence. Pit, pat. Half deafened by the hammering of his heart, Ming listens to the stillness outside. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. He leans back down to the slit and peers across the cabin, blinking the darkness out of his eyes. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. The gentle disturbance growing louder. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Struggling to see what lies beyond the upper edge of his vision, he lays his head flat against the metal floor. A long, black tendril drips down from the darkness above. Pat. Ming nearly cries out, but stalls before it escapes his lips. Pit. Wide-eyed, he gazes as the thin legs of some unknown creature gently slaps against the floor. Pat. Cylindrical, an inch wide, the legs end in a knobby stub that flattens as it hits the metal. Pit. The legs stalk back and forth in front of the locker with a gentle rustling of undisturbed leaves. Pat. Pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat. The feet patter as the creature slowly walks the length of the cabin. Pit, pat, pit, pat, pit. The tendrils pause in front of the locker. Frozen in fear, Ming watches as they delicately lumber closer. Silence. With a softer sound than before, like the brushing aside of a curtain, unseen arms explore the doors of the locker, prodding, searching. A sharp screech of metal, and the latch begins to rattle. As the bolts slide open, Ming clamps his eyes shut. A sudden brilliance of light flows in from the gap. A sudden pitter, and the latch falls down. Soft footsteps retreating from the cabin. The light disappears. Once again, Ming is left in the blackness. The next morning, he slowly exits the locker and wanders onto the deck. The boat is devoid of life. The deck and cabin are seared glossy black. A wide hole melted through the steel yawns down into the hole below. Quickly, Ming grabs the remaining fresh water and stores it onto the ship's lifeboat, along with a scorched pistol he finds near the railing. With starvation and certainty, he casts away from the clipper, rowing endlessly until his dark shape disappears over the horizon. The next day, he's discovered and rescued by an Australian freighter. He rages deliriously of floating lights, thin tendrils of legs that slap, a soft rustling in the night. A week later, he explains to an official inquiry that the ship's fuel tank exploded and sunk with all the hands but himself. The clipper is never found, and the public's interest fades. Ming moves on with his life. As he finishes his story, he opens his eyes. I'm astonished, not to mention doubtful, at his vivid account. Still, I can't figure out why he kept such an incredible tale silent for so long. I ask. He turns towards me, tears rolling down from the wrinkled corners of his eyes. I shouldn't have told you story, he mumbles. I know tell story, and people stay happy. Annoyed, I grab my hat and rise to leave. Suddenly, he grabs my coat with both hands and pulls me towards his face. The sounds, he cries. I hear them before, I hear them after. My whole life I hear them, but not see them. Now I know. I know what stalks in the night outside my window. He waves a finger in front of my face. You hear them too, but you not know what they are. I know, they following you too. Pit-pat, 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 pit-pat. Behind you in the shadow. Anguished, he screams, spit and tears flying off his face. Always, always, they are watching you from the darkness.
This creepypasta is called House of Rules. I live in a house of rules. I should explain. I moved here 3 months ago, flat number 27. The flat was a repossession. I never met the previous owner, and to date, know him only from the post I received in his name. I could make up stories of him vanishing or screams being heard in darkness one night. I could make such exaggerated claims, but this is not a work of fiction, nor it is written to entertain. I had just gotten a new job, a promotion that I waited years for. This was meant to be the next step to greater things, but I needed to move quickly to save on a long drive each day. When I found this place, I was so overjoyed. It was well located and within my price range, and apart from being extremely run down and dirty, had so much potential. It's a duplex apartment, with a guest room and a spare bathroom on the ground floor, and a dressing room and several storage rooms on the top floor. The purchase of this, though, was a complicated one, due in part to the poor record keeping and the loss of deeds and plans of the house. What should have taken a month from start to finish took 4 times as long. Because of this length of time, I took several viewings, and each time was amazed by the windows and cupboards that I could not recall from previous visits. Rooms seemed to be bigger and lighter, and even more inviting. Even the estate agent was baffled that her property listing documents were constantly wrong. The neighbors in the block of the flats are a strange lot. They don't talk. They keep to routines and you can set a clock by. When I first moved in, I tried to invite them to a housewarming party because I was just so desperate to meet new people. No one came. They get in at the same time every day and never leave the house. I never heard them moving around at night. One of them, who was a nervous man from upstairs who constantly fidgets and glances around, apologized afterward. He explained his lack of attendance was simply because he wasn't allowed to. At the time, I presumed he meant by that was because of his wife, but now I'm not so certain, as he was the only one I had got to know since the move. I did my best to become friendly and even felt like I was making headway. Then I made the mistake of asking about the previous owner, to which he made an awkward and short response before making his excuse. I have not seen or heard from him since. The rules, as I came to understand them, became apparent over time. The first was sleeping only in my bedroom. I slept once in a lounge on purpose, dozing off on the sofa, until I woke up to my arm trapped between the sofa and the wall. A wall that was several feet away when I closed my eyes a few hours earlier. I was overcome with a feeling, a very strange feeling, that I was somewhere I shouldn't be. This feeling wouldn't leave me until I hurriedly stumbled up to my bed, where I only felt truly safe when I hid under the blankets like a scared child. I only fell asleep once more in a lounge after that, by accident. I was woken up once again with a feeling that I should leave, that it would be unsafe to stay and I should not be here. This time, however, a sweater I left across the room was on the radiator, and that was tied around my neck. It was pulled so tightly enough to leave a striking mark on my throat. The rule of sleeping only in my bedroom stands alongside others. I learned that I should clean up my dishes immediately when I stepped out of the kitchen after depositing my plate and sat down on the safety pin that was jutted out the back of the sofa. I learned not to take showers for too long when the water suddenly turned scaling hot and remained so, no matter how much I desperately tried to turn it off, and then was explicably normal temperature when I tried it moments after. I learned that I must keep the place tidy, that I must not waste electricity, and no matter what noise I hear at night, I should never ever explore. Another rule is that guests are not welcomed. The last time I had a guest, it was a friend who invited themselves by making arguments to come and see me until I relented. How could I not? Despite my concerns that I could not air down for the weekend, I spent the entire time terrified for their safety, and pretty much drove them away with my strange behavior accordingly. But there were no events. Such things made me bold and I began to relax. I stayed awake until late, played music at night, and did whatever I wanted, even going so far as feeling like I had triumphed, as the house remained meekly quiet. It was almost immediately after they left that I first noticed the headache and nausea, which became worse and worse as the gas leak continued. I only just made it out before I succumbed to it. I have so many things I could tell you, example after example, and I just don't know where to begin. I need you to look past your skepticism and see that this is real, and this is more of a coincidence and more than just a child's play haunting. I am not being haunted, I am being ruled. The rules are only part of it, and they are a part I play. The rest is done without me, and not only that, but around me. The walls shift, and doors open some days but won't the next. The number of windows in my bedroom increased one by one over consecutive nights, and then there was only one again. There is a cupboard at the top of my stairs that changes in size quite regularly. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life was when I opened it and saw it went back several meters more than I remembered. When I walked in, somehow the door shut behind me. I groped in the dark, silently reaching out for a wall I knew must be there. Yet my fingers only touched the air. I do not know how long I fumbled around for, but it was only as my panic attack rose that my shaking fingers found the wooden door. Have you ever woken up in a room with a chair sitting at the end of your bed? A chair that came from the dining room, which is down a flight of stairs and along a hallway. Have you ever walked into a room and seen a storage cupboard that was not there before? Have you ever observed more stairs on a staircase as you go down them than there was when you went up? Have you ever entered a room looking for something, and then when you gave up and left, realized that half an hour has already passed? I have lived all of these things, and were I a better, more scientific man, I would have kept a running log of all of it. I would have found proof I need to show the world that I am not crazy, that this is real, that this is a living nightmare. 5 hours have passed since I sat down to write this. I hope to prepare some lunch today and pray that there are no drawing pins in my bread, like last week when I realized I hadn't hoovered. Instead, it is getting dark. I now live a life of routine, like my neighbors. I just turn off the music. No loud noises after dark is one of the rules, and it's one of the rules that I hate the most, because it makes me feel so alone. Lights left on in the rooms that are empty, or too many in one room, are prone to fusing, or even shattering without warning. So I currently only have the glare of the computer screen and television and a lamp on. Soon I shall be going to bed, and the doors that shut behind me as I head up to bed lock, and I will wake up in a room with windows wherever they please, and doors that may or may not open in cupboards that can be as small or as big as each variation allows. The television in the room I am in has a satellite connection, and with it countless channels. Right now, all of them are in a fuzzy state of static, except for National Geographic, so I am forced to listen to a documentary on carnivorous plants as I type. I try not to dwell on the exhaustion of a beetle on the screen, as it tries in vain to escape from the prison that will soon digest it. The remote does not appear to work. It took my pulling the plug from the socket to turn the TV off just a moment ago, and even that I loathe to do, for the fear that it may stay on and never leave me. If those images had continued when the plug was removed, I would have screamed myself into madness. I could push the neighbors to talk more. I could rebel against the rules. I could start a fire and torch the whole building, but truly, I just want to get by. I get the feeling that up until now, I have simply been coached, like a dog, to do what is required of me. I feel like the punishments could get a lot worse. The occasional demonstrations of strength and enforcement of the rules, and the occasional mild punishment when I transgress, like one tap the nose of a dog when it misbehaves. That is when I hope for it I can behave. Stepping out of line causes me nothing but harm. It is only out of fear and preservation of my own human dignity that I do not explain here and what happens when the house feels like it really needs to punish me. Needless to say, the scar will be with me for the rest of my life. Which brings us to here. I cannot go on. I took the decision to write this with the remaining fight that I still have in me, to at least ask for help. I cannot do it over the phone, I cannot write a letter, and my only hope is to write it into a story inconspicuously and without the details that might draw attention to the content. All I can hope is that someone sees enough to spot my cry for help, and that they find a way to contact me where I can get a lifeline I need to escape. I cannot ask directly, it is too risky, and besides, any form of open rebellion has been snuffed out of me with pain and suffering and terror. I do fear of my own safety, for my punishment for breaking the rules, and I am surprised that I'm being allowed to even get this far. In over 1,000 words that I have written, there hasn't been a power cut or computer error that had lost everything. Perhaps there is still hope, but the truth is, I'm scared. Scared of what touched my face in my sleep the night before last after I accidentally left a tap running, clutching firmly the bruises on my cheek that still remain. I am scared of what left a pair of scissors in my slippers, or what power moves wooden doors and plaster walls seemingly at a whim. Most of all, I am scared that by writing this, I may wake up in a tiny room with no doors or windows, a room that grows smaller every time that I blink.
This creepypasta is called The Rake. During the summer of 2003, events in northeastern United States involving a strange, human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed, primarily focused on rural New York State, and once found in Idaho. Self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origins. Emotions ranged from extremely dramatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 2 dozen documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book, A Mariner's Log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not come back here. We shall not come here again. At the request of the Rake. A journal entry translated from Spanish, 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice, unintelligible. A suicide note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it is necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once, I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again, I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever awake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Lenny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. From a witness in 2006. 3 years ago, I have just returned from a trip to Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids straight to bed and we called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he was out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly. His knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused a strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body's position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into a fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, it scrambled around the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly into a flowing sorrel way right along the covers until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. It was completely silent for about 30 seconds, probably closer to 5, but it seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. It then placed his hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading into the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop this thing before it hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. It turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara. The creature ran down the stairs as my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, the news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in the hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and talked about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen a creature we now refer to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages, then never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of an encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to an occasional sound to sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. It still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I heard it before, and now I believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night, I'll wake up to see him staring at me. So, I hope you all enjoyed that creepypasta called The Rake. The Rake is one of the classic creepypastas and probably one of the most classic cryptids out there. So I decided, hey, why not just redo the story, because I did do the story a long time ago before I had anything to really edit my videos with. So I decided, hey, I might as well just do it again, since I can do it more justice. I'm not going to bore you guys with the whole GamerSubs thing because I'm not sponsored by GamerSubs, but if anyone from GamerSubs is watching this and you want to work with me, feel free to hit up my email. It's on the channel. And I'm always down to talks because I am broke and I will take any type of sponsorship. Outside that, I have nothing else to say. Just thank you so much for clicking on my video out of hundreds of videos on YouTube. It means a lot to me. And if you made this through, just thank you. If you did enjoy, please leave a like. It helps out the channel. And if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. It is free. And I post 3 times a week. 3 videos every week that are edited. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short. It just depends on like how much time I have to edit and all this stuff, because I do Twitch outside of this and also just some other stuff. And also I do have daily YouTube shorts. It kind of depends what happens for my streams, because sometimes I turn those clips into shorts and I post them to my channel, or just stuff that I can clip while I play video games. So if that does interest you, please just check out my channel. But outside that, nothing else more to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye everyone.